Welcome to the Eric Brady podcast, Series 1, Adolf Hitler, His Bombers and Me. Episode 7, Evacuated to Folkestone. Eric, you were first evacuated to Folkestone on the south coast, which would appear to be the route any invasion would have come. So why did the government send you there?
It was believed by the Allies that the Germans would be held at the Maginot Line, which the French had built between 1930 and 36, stretching along the French border facing Germany. The Maginot Line was a very strong line of submerged, virtually, guns and gun emplacements, of artillery in particular, and also with linked forts right along the length. It was extremely strong, and it was believed that that would contain any German invasion, so that the warfare on the ground would be contained in Europe, as it had been in World War I, and the UK would only be attacked from the air by bombers, as had happened actually in World War I, first of all with the Zeppelins, and then with the Gotha bombers. However, in this war, the bombing was expected to be much more intense because of the way the bombers themselves had been developed.
How old were you when you were first evacuated, and what do you remember of it?
I was evacuated in September 1939, immediately before my 6th birthday. So I was still 5, but a couple of weeks later, I was actually going to be 6. I don't remember anything of the night before or going to school, but I do know that we assembled at all our local schools. We were checked for our suitcases that we had, which, of course, at that age, we couldn't carry much. Made sure that we had a label with our name, our school and our class on, tied to our coat lapels. There we got a bus after the register was taken, got a bus up to Grove Park Station. And many years later, when I was more grown up, 14, I went to work in London and would travel from Grove Park Station. And years later again, when my daughter was working, she worked in London, and she would travel into London from Grove Park Station. So that place was quite familiar to me. We were delighted when we finally found that we London vackies, or evacuees, were being taken to Folkestone, because to us Folkestone was a seaside place that we'd visit usually once a year on a Sunday school outing, and it was seaside. So of course it was great for us going down just towards the end of the summer to actually live at the seaside. On the first occasion of evacuation, I don't remember how we were allocated to our first foster parents, but I do remember that I was taken with 2 other lads from my class to what seemed a very tall house. We were taken up flights of stairs to the loft, which had been painted green, so it looked as though we were in a big tent, and there were camp beds set up on the flooring of the loft that had been done. So to us, even more so, was it camping. We had 1 blanket on the camp bed with 1 thin pillow for each of us, and that was it. Well, that was okay in the warm summer days, but as autumn and then winter came, it proved very inadequate. And I remember one night waking up shivering with cold because my single blanket had fallen off me. The other 2 lads, being brothers, had pushed their camp beds together, and I thought they were very lucky because they could have 2 blankets over them. And that was all we had during that very cold winter. It was so cold, my mother later told me, that the Folkestone harbour partially froze over, and the snow that was cleared in the streets was so high that on the one occasion she came to visit Kitty and I there, as she walked along the pavement, she could barely see the tops of the buses over the piles of snow at the side of the road.
You and Kitty were evacuated together. Did you see much of your sister when you were in Folkestone?
Only saw her the once when my mother came down to see us at Christmas. She was in one class of the school at the top end because she was 5 years older than I was, and I was in the young end. And because we had to be fitted in somewhere in the new foster areas and schools, we were separated and allocated to foster parents in our classes and never saw each other except on the one occasion, as I say, when my mother came down to see us.
Do you remember what you did with your free time in Folkestone?
In the September, I presume we went to the beach because there were no problems at that stage. Later on in the winter, I do remember that the other two lads and I built snow forts. They would defend or attack, and I'd do the opposite. The only problem and the main cause of argument was who was going to be the Germans and who was going to be the British. After winter, you get spring and summer. And so we were delighted again that not only would our loft camp become warmer again, but we'd actually spend time, the whole time, actually at the seaside. So though we'd have to go to school, of course, we'd be able to spend all our time on the beach. Unfortunately for us, though, the generals had been making the reappraisal of the German capabilities, and at the time they invaded France, the British general decided that in fact the Maginot wouldn't necessarily hold and that we would be invaded. The invasion coast, of course, would be along the south coast, would incorporate Folkestone, and therefore we had to be hurriedly moved again, re-evacuated to somewhere safer. And the place they chose for us from Folkestone was South Wales, which wasn't actually the best choice to have made.
To buy your copy of Adolf Hitler, His Bombers and Me to read alongside the series, go to ericbradybooks.co.uk. The Eric Brady podcast can be found on YouTube, podcast services, and at ericbrady.blogspot.com.